Hi everybody, this is our daily agenda for Tuesday, May 18th. Today is evens. So for today, we are continuing on with poetry. We are going to be getting into the different types of poems. Yesterday, I introduced you to the different types of poems. They are sonnet, free verse, sonnet, haikus, and free verse. And we will be doing a slam poem, but that'll come later. So for today, we're really going to focus on our sonnet poem and the origins of sonnets. What are they? A couple of you guys, when I mentioned sonnets, kind of gave me a little bit of a blank look. You guys have never heard of them before. So I have a Prezi here that is going to break them down a little bit more for you. So I'm going to go through it in this presentation. So the origin of sonnets. Let's start at the beginning. Where did sonnets come from? Sonnets are originally from the United Kingdom. They're from Europe. They're a European form of poetry. For those of you that don't know where Europe is, I'll have a Google map so that you guys can actually see, where is Europe, Ms. Ornelas, and where is England, and what does it look like in relation to the United States. So these poems in particular, onto that next slide. So the history of sonnets, now that we know kind of where they came from, they were invented in the 13th century by some Italian man named Petrarch. He wrote 366 poems that were all sonnets. And of these poems, 317 of them, ladies and gentlemen, were about love, and they were all sonnets. It's a big theme that sonnets do tend to have. So even in these sonnets, though, we find early traces of similes, like, my love is like a flower, or metaphors, my love is a flower. I have a fun little Old English. You can hear it here, and we can kind of listen to hear what Old English would sound like. So I'm not going to play it now, but parrot, what meaneth this besnize? This is Middle English, ladies and gentlemen. So when sonnets were coming around, some of the English is a lot different than what we expect now. All right, so moving forward a little bit more in time. So that was the 13th century. Now we're moving more towards the 16th century, so 300 years later. The sonnet, it's been around, it's been invented. It's kind of hanging around Europe a little bit, and now it's moving to England. So it went essentially from Italy to England. And in England is where it became popularized by this man named William Shakespeare, or the Bard. Some of you guys might be familiar with him here on the right, but he really helped put English literature, English poetry on the map. He wrote 154 sonnets, 37 to 38 plays, it's hotly debated, and 375 poems. That is a lot to write about. And I believe Shakespeare passed away fairly early on, so for him to have this huge amount of writing behind him, he really was able to put sonnets on the map. A lot of his plays incorporate this form of poetry, just spoken naturally within the plays. That's why he's kind of holding the skull. It's, his plays, his representation. He uses a lot of themes such as love, death, power, themes that are still around here. Even though, ladies and gentlemen, he was writing during the 15th and 16th century, those themes, we still see them here today. He influenced the English language greatly. If you've heard of phrases such as to be or not to be, tongue-tied, in a pickle, these are all phrases that come from him, from his plays, from his work. So he really put sonnets on the map just because of the sheer number, so because he had a lot, and also because sonnets were something that people could relate to. People would go to the theater, or in this case in England, it was called the Globe. And it was a circular theater, and I'll show you guys a little bit of a 3D rendering so you can see what the Globe looks like. It was a theater where people would come together to watch these shows. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, there was no phones, there was no TV. If you listen to music, usually it was in the church. So for him to have a theater where anyone from the lowest classes to the highest classes could enjoy theater, could hear these sonnets, it stuck with people by word of mouth and by being able to replicate it over and over and over again. So it's pretty cool. And then we also have, so now that we've learned a little bit more about Shakespeare and the Globe, what is the sonnet? These details. And this is what you're going to be using to fill in your notebooks, ladies and gentlemen. So, what are the features or details of this type of poem? Go ahead. Once you are on that, go ahead and actually write them down. So, they are 14 verses. They are 4 stanzas total. So, 3 stanzas with 4 verses. Then the last stanza has 2 verses. There are 10 syllables per line, There's a rhyme scheme, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, G. So that's what makes a sonnet. That's how we can see it and be like, yes, that is a sonnet. I recognize it. What you are required to do is to have an allusion and a metaphor, ladies and gentlemen. This is what I want you to put in your sonnet. You must make sure you have a metaphor and some sort of allusion. You have to allude to something, okay? And you have to compare the person to. You might be asking me, Ms. Ornelas, this is great, but what am I writing my sonnet about? Well, a lot of sonnets deal with love, ladies and gentlemen. As such, we're going to be writing our sonnets with love. The love we have for somebody, it could be a parent, a friend, family member, anyone in our lives that we really just kind of have that love for, that we want to make sure we are recognizing them. So, we are going to be looking at Sonnet 18 by William Shakespeare. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? And we are going to get to actually be able to listen to it and hear it. It's a lot different when you read the sonnet to when you hear it. And remember, his work was meant to be heard, not necessarily read. And it's going to be the same thing with your work when you guys make your sonnets. It's better to hear it, ladies and gentlemen, rather than to just see it and read it silently. So, we're going to be looking at Sonnet 18. So you guys are going to be writing your themes based on love. So in your themes right here, this is where you're going to put love. Right here, what's required, make sure to put metaphor and allusion so you're aware. This is what I need to put in each poem. And then you have the details of the poem here. All right. And then lastly, why do we use sonnets? So sonnets, they're the beginnings of poetry. And in the English language for us, they started in the 13th century. That was 700 years ago, ladies and gentlemen. So they really just kind of kick things off. They're music, they're lyrical music. They have that rhythm that lets them carry on. There's a structure to the poems that's easy to recognize. Once you get the hang of it, you'll be able to see that poem. And it really helps bring in a different perspective to somebody. It's very easy to tell somebody, I love you and I care for you. But it's very different to write an entire poem that says, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Okay, and then I have a little bit of a translation here for you guys. I'm going to have somebody actually go ahead and read it so you guys can actually see what is this poem talking about a little bit more. All right. So that's a little bit on what we are going to cover in terms of just the sonnets and what are they. I went over your notebook a little bit more, but again, right here, ladies and gentlemen, where it says, what are the features or details of this poem? That's where you're writing, this poem has 14 verses, 10 syllables. This is where you are putting those details down. And we're going to do one together in class. What is required from this poem? Well, for the sonnet specifically, a metaphor and an allusion. That's the language that I want to see coming from you guys. That's what I want you guys to use. You've practiced it. Now you're going to really use it in your poem. The theme. For the sonnet in particular, you guys are going to write about love. Love for a parent. Now you guys have to fill in the blank. Love for a parent, a friend, a family member. So maybe your grandma. Whoever that love is for. That's where you're going to put that. Okay, so for my 5, 6, 1, 2, you have on your last one, how can you create patterns in your poems? Here, I want you to think about the patterns that you've used. Are you going to use your metaphor twice? Metaphor is going to be used twice. How are you using rhyme scheme? Rhyme scheme is a pattern, ladies and gentlemen. Are you going to repeat words? I am going to repeat myself. Repeat verse 1 and 3. However you're putting those patterns, I want to see what are you going to do to create a pattern. For my 3, 4, your bottom section is unanswered questions. This is just really any questions you still have about sonnets. So I have what are syllables? This poem uses a lot of syllables, and if you're not confident in syllables, that's a question you might still have. So make sure you write that down. So that's what we are going to be doing for today. We might not get time to it, ladies and gentlemen. I'll briefly cover it here, but there will be a video tomorrow with more detail on this. Sonnet templates. So you guys are actually going to write your sonnets if you have time today. Again, I broke down the entire poem for you guys. So down from the rhyme scheme, this is stanza 1, stanza 2, stanza 3, stanza 4. Each one of these lines should be 10 syllables. That's why it says 10 syllable lines. There is an example for you guys that I made. Shall I compare thee to a ray of sunshine? Thou art more brilliant and blinding, blinding and binding. You are like a sign. Oops. There you go. Now that I am only now truly just finding. Sometimes the sunshine can be unrelenting and often scorches you to a crisp, and the mercilessness can be troubling. The heat of it can leave you with a lisp. But thy radiance is charming to me, nor lose possession of your kindest thoughts, nor shall they brag about your power to be. When they see you, they will see what they sought. So long as men can breathe, you shall be mine. So long as this lives, you are like a rhyme. So I really just took a lot of what Shakespeare was doing with his poem, and I included the link on Google Classroom. I took a lot of his words, and I just added my own twist. I added my own rhyme scheme to it. It's still a love sonnet, ladies and gentlemen. But I made sure to compare it. I made sure to kind of mimic it and copy it. So you guys will be doing that. For my 3-4, you have the template, ladies and gentlemen. Use the template, okay? And use my example if you're confused. Put them side by side. All right, so that's what we will be doing today, ladies and gentlemen. This is where you can find it, as always, under Semester 2 Poetry Unit. It's going to be under Sonnet Rough Draft. And then Poetry Materials, this is where you can find my Prezi if you are confused. Every day I'm going to upload different videos that are attached to them. So Sonnet's going to have a video, haiku, and so will free verse and slam poem. So you guys can continue to see it and refer back to it if you have questions. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I know this is a lot. Don't worry, we'll unpack it together in class. As always, if you have any questions, reach out to me, reach out to Ms. Arroyo, reach out to Ms. Reyes, and we'll help you guys out. Other than that, I will see you guys in class.